Hello, Patreon supporters. Thanks for joining us for the spoiler talk for Piranesi. I just want to say, Livius, that this is our 7th episode in a row that contains spoiler talk. Pretty wild.
Wow. That is, yeah, because like I said, sometimes I think to myself, we do it for most, but I mean, essentially what you're saying is over the last 2.5 months, it's been all.
Oh, yeah, and you know what? Now I'm looking. Out of the last 10, 9 of them have had spoiler talk. So,
wow,
really bringing the content lately, and it's all because of our lovely supporters on Patreon. So thank you so much. But we're gonna talk about some of the more crazy aspects of Piranesi.
Yeah. So here's what I want to. The first thing is really more of a question than anything else. Did you at some point just think that that maybe he was crazy? That this was all going to reveal itself as he's in a fucking straitjacket in a mental hospital or something along those lines?
I did not.
I thought that. And you know what really did it for me? Regular meetings with the other.
Oh, as if it was like a therapist or something?
Like an appointment. Like he just comes by and every Thursday, again, Tuesday and Thursday or whatever, you get your 1 hour with him, and he talks to you about some things, and that, what we are seeing is kind of his interpretation.
I had not thought of that. No, I see where you would get that from, but no, that did not occur to me.
All right, the other thing. So the first really weird thing, other than all of the weird wording, it's in the very first goddamn line of the book, right? Like an albatross is something that's an earthbound creature, right? I mean, yeah, essentially, right? But man, when the other is using a shiny device. I was totally like, that motherfucker's totally on like an iPad or a smartphone or something along those lines. And then I became really, really interested in what was going on.
Yeah, because even the use of the word device implies knowledge of electronic devices. And I feel like that was just so well introduced because it was from his naive perspective, but he knew what shoes were and stuff like that, and he knew what a suit was and like charcoal and all that kind of stuff. So it was so interesting to see that unfold as time went on. Not knowing, not even like having a blind spot basically for your knowledge of stuff was an interesting feature in this book.
And the fact that people can easily walk into this world and like this left, a lot more questions unanswered than answered questions, right? Mm-hmm. Like, what the fuck is this world that's just made up of fucking statues? And it's not like, because I also at one point when I was starting to get that feeling, I was like, oh, well, this is the world inside. Like he created this world, right? Like, and that's for some reason, I thought we might get a flashback to him being lost at a museum when he was 4, right? So in his head, he has created this world that's, but the cop, right? Raphael, she just comes and goes like at one point. So like, what is this fucking world that this, I don't even know if scientist is the right word, right? This nutcase discovered, I forget his name, but the guy who first found it, who had a dude in prison that he kept trying to send there.
Lawrence Arn Sales.
Yep, that guy.
Yeah.
So really interesting.
And it's interesting because it was kind of explained, but very briefly, in the talk of all the culty science, non-science, pseudoscience kind of culty stuff, that like this is the world that's what is it? It's like it's not like, so it's basically like if damn. I should have highlighted that passage because it was so simply put, but like basically like anything that happens in the world is reflected here. And that's what all the statues were is the explanation of what the statues were and why they were there. But like from the perspective of Lawrence Arn Sales, like he was trying to find what makes that happen, what makes things happen or something, the knowledge behind the like basically the why behind everything that was happening, and he thought he could find it in this other world or something. I don't know. So it was explained, but very briefly and like in a way where it was like it doesn't really matter, but this is what's going on.
Right. Yeah. Well, and that's the other interesting thing too. So the other is obviously also seeking same knowledge, right? That he's going to be able to use for his own means. But it's interesting that like the originator like kind of gave up on it. Like he's there, but he just kind of drops in a visit. You know?
Yeah. And he even told Matthew Rose Sorensen that I know he's looking for this great and secret knowledge, but it's not here.
Yeah, which is interesting because, I mean, just I love the idea. You know, this is like The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, right? But like maybe for adults, that there's this place that you could easily go to that's very different and mysterious. But in this particular case, it's non-threatening. So, I mean, yes, there's the tides and stuff, but you can be wholly self-sufficient.
Yeah.
There's not, you know, warring tribes, right? The Wizard of Oz, for example, another one, right? Like you can transcend and go to this other place, but this one's just kind of low key. And for me, the most touching moment in the whole book is after Matthew gets out, right? So Piranesi goes out and he tries to live a normal life. So he's still Piranesi. He actually is kind of a third person at this point.
Yeah.
But he goes and visits the guy who had been there previously, that the professor was keeping prisoner.
Yep.
And he brings him there, and the guy like runs to a spot under the stairs and just like curls up and cries. Like this is a place that clearly was also important to that guy, but he didn't know how to get back.
Yeah, totally.
So there's a lot of really great stuff in here around the house, I guess, you know, that's really, really good, and just enough is left out to keep it really intriguing.
Yeah, and it emphasizes how wrong Valentine Ketterly, the other, had this place. And obviously what Lawrence Arnsales eventually came around to was like there's no power that you could use this place to exploit and get. The power of the place is just, it's a comfortable place that makes you feel safe. It's not a place that you can like draw on to like gain dominion over other people and stuff like that. It's just a place that you can go to be happy. In contrast with the real world, which we feel safe in, and I would feel in danger in a place where I have to fish and like make clothes out of seaweed to survive in. But that place protects people from all of like the damaging things that are happening like in our real actual world.
Yep. You and me both, bro, because fish are gross.
Yeah, I don't like eating fish either. So I would probably try to eat birds more than fish. But
there you go.
Another thing, so like you were talking about touching moments, I think one of the things that I think had a big impact, I agree with you about the moment you said, but also when he's walking around in the streets toward the end of the book and he sees like a homeless person and he recognizes him from one of the statues, and then he sees other people and he recognizes from the statues. Man, that was really like powerful because the statues represent what's happening in reality, and they basically like tell the story of reality instead of you seeing reality. And so when he starts seeing people in the statues and attaching the value that he had for that statue to the actual person, that was a really big moment.
I agree, man. I you know, it's like when we go back over, like my score I don't feel accurately reflects how good this book is.
Yeah, mine's gonna get changed.
Which, that's, you know, my personal score is probably higher than like it's greater than the sum of its parts,
right?
Because there's so much good stuff, and there's really good messaging in there too. And I think you touched on that a little bit, right? Like how this simple life can be so much more rewarding than the things and the chaos that we chase, right? Like that's what we do. You know, you want to have the newest this, or you want to have the biggest that, or the most expensive this other thing. And here's a guy that couldn't have been fucking happier, you know, seaweed on his fucking feet for shoes, and, you know, and talking. There's the birds he talks to every time he sees them in the one particular hall. And he's like, I only had like 10 minutes to talk to him today. And you're like, this is fucking nuts. But you know what? He was perfectly satisfied with that.
Yeah, and if you zoom out on like the overall picture, because we haven't like basically laid it out, Dr. Ketterly stranded him in this place so that he could exploit him to get the info that he needed for his various dubious plans. And, you know, he basically had his own mind and memory and personality kind of like scraped out over time, over the 5 years or whatever that he spent in this place, but he became a happier, more content person because he, like all of the, like the poisoning of modern life, it was removed, and it was just like a him and nature kind of thing going on. So yeah, it's just so interesting to see. It's definitely like a look at self and what's important to us as people, versus what we value, in life and stuff. And there's some very obvious, once you read the book, you'll like, hopefully you've read the book. If you're listening to this, you'll understand, like, it's not subtle with what it's saying, no. But the message is still powerful because it's looking at like what really matters to you, what makes you happy, and why. So yeah, big stuff.
There is, and to add to that, he knows, so fairly late in the book, right? Like he realizes the other was even trying to kill him at one point, right? Like when Raphael shows up, when the cop shows up. And even then he goes and finds his body and like prepares it in the way that he thinks it should be prepared. Mm-hmm. Like wishes, like tells the boat, I wish you could have saved him. Like, yeah, he took this value of this other person in his life, much better than you or I would if we found out someone was trying to use us, for their own duplicitous means, right? Like
imprisoned us, enslaved us, basically.
Yeah, and it's like the longest parable I've ever read. Mm-hmm. And it does a good job because you're right. It's a little on the overt side, but when you're reading it, it just doesn't feel that way. It doesn't feel preachy, which, in a lot of cases when something's overt, it does come across as a little preachy, and I don't think this one does at all.
Right, and I think that actually is credit to the choice of narrative coming from like an epistolary perspective of the main character. We have that simplistic kind of altruistic like perspective that we're seeing things through. So it's not right and wrong or spite or me versus you. It's just, it's simpler than that. So I think that the not preachiness comes from the fact that it was from the perspective of a character who wasn't a preachy, like didn't have the capacity to preach.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Anything else you want to talk about before we go back and do our wrap-ups?
Just very briefly want to acknowledge that there was the weird culty pseudoscience side of stuff that was revealed primarily through journals by Matthew Rose Sorensen pre-imprisonment in the house. And did you get the feeling, so like this, I feel like the amount of information that was provided was perfect for the story that was being told. At the same time, this is one of those things where it's like, I want to read more about all of the events that led up to this, even though I don't think it was necessary for the story. I just want more of it. So I'm wondering if you felt the same way.
I don't know that's, now that you say it, yes. I don't know. In my mind, I was thinking a lot about the Raw Shark texts. Mm-hmm. And Unspace and this history of other people that maybe went missing because of this thing.
Yep.
So yes, absolutely. The I'll call the teaser stuff in this book was tremendous.
That was Raw Shark Text was going to be one of my analogies as far as like seeing what had come before. Yeah, it definitely gave me that feeling. Tonally, I think the movie Memento came up a little bit in my mind. Mm-hmm.
Can I tell you, I was going to save this for the regular review, and I'll probably include it in my wrap-up, but maybe about 40 pages in, I was just thinking Brian Evanson.
Yeah.
I was specifically, what was that book we reviewed that I didn't really like? That definitely came to mind.
The Warren?
The one about, yes, The Warren, kind of along those lines, and this weird, like familiar but not familiar kind of thing that I feel Evanson does really well.
Yeah, he does like an otherworldly, at this scope, he can do that for sure. Yeah, yep. And at this caliber.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, that's really, I mean, like, it's not much to the story, but like it's a really complex story, even though it's not. It's weird to. It would be weird for me to kind of explain it to someone, even though
For
it's
sure.
literally what we do.
It's what we do. Yeah, exactly. So, all right. Before we head back over to our wrap ups, I do want to thank, let's go, our three most recent patrons, Brad, Tessa, and Janelle. Thank you so much for your contributions. We hope that you are getting spoiled at the tier that you're at and listening to these. Welcome to the Booked family. So, I get the feeling we will probably be back next week. I think the book we're going to read next probably merits a little bit of spoiler talk too. So we'll be back in about a week or so.